In 2023, Klarna, one of Europe's most valuable fintech companies, replaced 700 customer service employees with an AI system. The AI handled the same volume of work, at a fraction of the cost. Klarna's CEO called it a success. Now here's the part nobody talks about. Those 700 people had degrees. They had skills. They had followed the path society told them to follow. And the path led them straight into a chatbot. There is a promise that was made to millions of people. Work hard in school. Go to university. Get a degree. Find a good office job. And if you do all of that, you'll be fine. You won't get rich, but you'll be stable. You'll be comfortable. You'll be middle class. For decades, that promise held. But right now, quietly, inside boardrooms and HR departments and quarterly earnings calls, that promise is being reconsidered. Not because of a financial crash, not because of outsourcing to cheaper countries, because of software that can now do what a degree used to make you valuable for. This is not a video about robots taking factory jobs. This is a video about what happens when AI enters the office. And the people under pressure are not assembly line workers. They are writers, analysts, designers, programmers, recruiters, customer service agents. They are, in many cases, exactly the kind of person who followed all the rules. But the most dangerous part of this story isn't who's losing their jobs today. It's who may never get one at all. And we'll get to that. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what the office job meant. And over the 20th century, it became the symbol of something powerful: security. It became the middle-class dream. If you had a degree and a desk job, you had health insurance, a pension, a mortgage. You had arrived. This was the deal society offered, and for a long time, it worked. And the promise was backed by something real. Knowledge was scarce. If you knew how to read financial statements, write marketing copy, manage a database, or translate between languages, that knowledge was genuinely hard to replicate. It was yours, and employers paid for it. Here's a thought that should stop you cold. The entire economic value of a college education, the salary premium, the career stability, the middle-class access, was built on one assumption: that knowing things was rare. AI just made knowing things cheap. Not free, not perfect, but cheap enough to change the math entirely. And that changes everything that was built on top of it. But something changed. In November 2022, a company called OpenAI released a chatbot to the public. It was free, it was fast, and within 5 days, it had 1 million users. Within 2 months, 100 million. The product was called ChatGPT, and it was the fastest growing consumer application in history. But here's what made it genuinely different from every technology that came before. Previous automation replaced physical labor. Machines replaced hands and legs. This was replacing something else, something that had always belonged to humans: thinking. Not all thinking, not yet, but a very specific, very valuable kind of thinking, the kind that office workers are paid to do every day. Summarize this report. Write this email. Analyze this data. Draft this proposal. Translate this document. GPT-4 could do all of it, faster than any human, for almost nothing. And it wasn't alone. Within months, tools like Midjourney were producing professional quality images. GitHub Copilot was writing code. 11 Labs was cloning voices. Runway was generating video. The capabilities that had justified the salaries of an entire class of workers were suddenly available to anyone with an internet connection. The question that followed was uncomfortable, and companies started asking it very quietly. How many of these people do we actually still need? The answer, when you look at what some of the world's biggest companies have already done, is more unsettling than you might expect. The layoffs started early. Not always with official announcements, not always with headlines. Sometimes it was a memo. Sometimes it was a restructuring. Sometimes it was simply, "We're not hiring for that role anymore." Then came the cases that were harder to dismiss. Klarna, the payments giant, replaced 700 customer service workers with an AI assistant. The CEO announced that the AI was doing the work of 700 people. Then, in the same breath, said the company intended to shrink its total headcount from 5,000 to 2,000. Not through mass firing, through not replacing people who left. Shopify went further. The company's CEO sent an internal memo telling employees that before any team could request more headcount, they now had to demonstrate why the work couldn't be done by AI first. AI became the default candidate. Humans had to justify their existence. Microsoft, the company that invested billions into OpenAI, began laying off entire teams, including hundreds of AI researchers, testers, and program managers. The company building the most powerful AI tools on Earth was using those tools to reduce the teams that built them. But here's what connects all of these stories, and what most people miss. These aren't technology companies panicking. These are companies that have already tested AI on their workforce and decided it works. Klarna's AI handled 2.3 million conversations in its first month. It matched the quality of human agents, according to their own data, and worked 24 hours a day without a lunch break or a sick day. The experiment is over. The results are in. And what they show is that a large portion of what knowledge workers do every day is now replicable, at scale, at almost no marginal cost. These weren't warehouse workers. These weren't truck drivers. These were knowledge workers. Exactly the people the system said would be safe. And the numbers tell a bigger story. Goldman Sachs estimated that generative AI could expose up to 300 million full-time jobs to some form of automation. The IMF went further, suggesting that in advanced economies, roughly 60% of jobs could be impacted by AI in some way. Now, impacted does not mean eliminated, but it does mean disrupted, changed, reduced, made cheaper to do without you. And the sector where the disruption is concentrated is not manufacturing. It is services. It is offices. It is exactly the work that was supposed to be safe. But there is one group for whom the situation is especially complicated. And this is the chapter that matters most. Now press that subscribe button, because this story is just getting started. Imagine you're 22 years old. You just graduated. 4 years. Student debt. Internships. You did everything right. You built a LinkedIn profile. You wrote cover letters. You applied everywhere. And now you're hitting a wall. Not because you're unqualified, but because the jobs that used to be the entry point into your industry are disappearing. Not all at once. Quietly. Slowly. But they're disappearing. And the companies replacing them with AI aren't announcing it. They're just not hiring. This is what we might call the entry-level trap. Here's how it works. For generations, entry-level jobs served a specific function. They weren't just jobs. They were training grounds. You hired a junior analyst to crunch numbers, and over 2 years, they learned to think like a senior analyst. You hired a junior designer to resize assets and mock up templates, and over time, they developed taste and judgment. You hired a junior copywriter to write product descriptions, and they slowly learned how to tell stories. The repetitive, lower-stakes work at the bottom of every profession was never just production. It was education in disguise. But now, that repetitive, lower-stakes work is precisely what AI does best. Need basic market research summarized? AI. Need product descriptions written? AI. Need a first draft of a legal memo? AI. Need data formatted, sorted, and analyzed? AI. The work that used to develop junior talent is now, increasingly, being handed to a machine that never sleeps, never asks for benefits, and doesn't need a manager. And companies are noticing. A survey from the World Economic Forum found that a significant share of employers expect AI to reduce their workforce over the next 5 years. And when asked which roles they plan to reduce, junior, task-based positions were consistently at the top of the list. Other surveys found that a large portion of hiring managers admitted to using AI tools to replace tasks previously done by junior staff. The math is brutal. If a junior analyst costs $60,000 a year and an AI subscription costs $20 a month, the question of who gets hired starts to look very different. But here's where the trap becomes truly dangerous. It's not just about the jobs themselves, it's about what those jobs produce. Senior professionals, the people who lead teams, make strategic decisions, and mentor others, didn't start at the top. They started at the bottom. They did the boring work. They made mistakes on low-stakes projects. They learned by doing. If you remove the entry level, you don't just remove jobs. You cut off the pipeline that produces senior talent. In 10 years, you may have a generation of people who were told to get educated, who got educated, and then found that the first rung of the ladder had been removed. They couldn't get in. They couldn't learn. They couldn't grow. And no amount of AI prompt engineering can teach you to lead a team, read a room, or make a judgment call under pressure. Those skills take years, and they start at the bottom. The entry-level trap is not just an economic problem. It's a structural problem, and it may take a decade before we fully understand the consequences. But to understand why companies keep doing this anyway, you have to understand the incentives. And when you see them clearly, they're almost impossible to argue with. To understand why this is happening, you have to understand something very simple. Companies are not evil, but they are rational. And right now, AI is making a very rational case for itself. But the most important thing to understand about how AI is reshaping the workforce isn't the layoffs you read about in headlines. It's the jobs that will never be created. Because here's how this actually works in most organizations. Nobody calls a meeting and announces, "We're going to replace the marketing team with AI." Instead, someone leaves. And the hiring manager asks, "Do we actually need to backfill this role? Because I've been using Claude to draft the briefs, and honestly..." And the answer is, no, we don't. No press release, no severance package, no headline. Just a job that existed, and then quietly didn't. This is the invisible layoff. And it may be the most significant labor shift of our generation, precisely because it's impossible to measure, protest, or report on. You can't pick at a job that was never posted. Klarna's CEO put it plainly. He said the company would use AI to reduce headcount from 5,000 employees to 2,000. Not through a wave of firings, but through attrition. People would leave, naturally, over time, and they simply wouldn't be replaced. Shopify's CEO was even more direct. He told every team, "Before you ask for a new hire, prove that AI can't do it first." In other words, the human is no longer the default candidate. And consider the numbers behind the decision. A mid-sized company with 200 employees might spend tens of millions of dollars a year on salaries, benefits, training, office space, and management overhead. McKinsey research suggests that AI tools can increase knowledge worker productivity by 30 to 40%, in some cases, allowing one person to do what previously required 3. So the arithmetic isn't complicated. Fewer people, more output, lower cost. One unfilled position, then another. Then a department that used to have 12 people, now running with 8. And the 8 that remain are stretched thinner, expected to use AI tools to compensate, which many of them do, successfully. But the jobs that vanished don't come back, and the jobs that were never created, they don't appear in any unemployment statistic. They're just absent, silently reshaping the workforce in a way that won't be fully visible until an entire generation has grown up unable to break in. Let's zoom out for a moment, because the real issue is not just employment. It's about what the middle class actually is. The middle class is not just an income bracket. It's a social contract. It says, if you contribute, if you work, if you play by the rules, you will be rewarded with stability, with dignity, with a share of the prosperity you help create. That contract has already been under pressure for years. Wages stagnated. Housing became unaffordable. The cost of education rose while the value of a degree fell. AI did not create these problems, but it may accelerate them in a way that is harder to reverse than anything that came before. Because here's what makes this wave different from previous waves of automation. In the past, technology destroyed some jobs and created new ones. The cotton gin replaced hand pickers, but created demand for textile factory workers. The automobile replaced horses, but created mechanics, road builders, oil refineries. The internet replaced travel agents, but created web designers, digital marketers, and software engineers. The argument from economists has always been, don't worry, New jobs always emerge. And historically, that's been true. But there's a catch. Those new jobs, the ones that emerge after each wave of automation, they tend to be harder, more technical, more creative, more cognitively demanding. They require exactly the kind of deep experience that used to come from starting at the bottom and working your way up. If AI removes the bottom, the entry level, the training ground, the apprenticeship, then who fills the top jobs in 20 years? And more critically, what happens to the tens of millions of people who are skilled enough for yesterday's middle-class jobs, but not yet skilled enough for tomorrow's? That gap, between the jobs that are disappearing and the jobs that are emerging, is where economic anxiety lives. It's where political frustration grows. It's where social trust erodes. And it is, right now, where millions of people are quietly discovering that the path they were promised no longer leads where it used to. So what do we do with all of this? Let's be honest about what we don't know. We don't know how many jobs AI will ultimately eliminate. We don't know which professions will adapt and which will collapse. We don't know whether the new jobs created by AI will be enough, in number, in quality, in accessibility, to replace what is lost. History suggests resilience. Economies adapt. People adapt. And there is genuine opportunity here. AI is also creating entirely new categories of work. In AI development, in AI training, in new creative industries that didn't exist 5 years ago. Companies that use AI well are becoming dramatically more productive, and some of that productivity does create growth and new roles. People who master AI tools are becoming more valuable, not less. But we have to be honest about the distribution of that opportunity. The people best positioned to benefit from AI are, by and large, already well positioned. They have access to tools, to education, to networks. The people most at risk are those who followed a path that was sold to them as safe, and are now discovering, mid-career or before they even start, that the rules changed while they were playing the game. That is not a reason for despair, but it is a reason to stop pretending that this wave of automation is like the ones before it. It isn't moving at the same speed, it isn't following the same rules, and it isn't waiting for policy or retraining programs or new social contracts to catch up. The truth is this: AI may not replace your job, but someone using AI might. And in a world where that sentence is increasingly true, the question is no longer whether to adapt, it's how fast.
Think about what that means. If this video told you something you didn't know, the real story of how power in the AI industry actually works, then you already understand why this channel exists. The biggest stories in technology aren't the products you use. They're the infrastructure underneath them, the decisions made decades before you ever heard the names. That's what we cover here. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.